Debra Ross is the founder, publisher, and CEO of Kids Out and About LLC, a media and marketing company that provides information on family-focused resources and events in communities across the country through its two main platforms, kidsoutанdabout.com and beyondthenest.com. Her site reaches 11 million visitors a year, 800,000 email subscribers each week in the 52 regions served in the US and Canada. Just incredible reach. Debra first launched Kids Out and About back in 2001, which was just before her two children were born. She then went on to homeschool both of them for K to 12. They're now in their 20s, successful homeschool and college graduates. And she continues to run these programs to help other families across the country and in Canada learn about what's available for their families in their communities. I had a chance to meet Deb at a Future of Education conference a couple of years ago. We've kept in touch since then. And I thought it would be great to have her on the show to talk not only about her entrepreneurial journey and insights on unconventional education, but also to share her perspective on what she finds parents desiring for their children's education. She has such a great snapshot of parents' wants and desires, again, all across the country and internationally. So, Deb Ross, welcome to the
Thank
LiberatED
you,
podcast.
Kerry. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. We have so much to talk about, but let's just start at the beginning with your founder journey. What made you decide to become an entrepreneur back in 2001?
Right. I actually started my own business in for technology consulting in 1994, actually. So I was an English major, and English majors can be everything or nothing. So I kind of opted for everything, starting with technology because it was 1991 and I started working for a publisher, and there was this thing called Windows coming out, and I was sort of number four on a four-man publishing company. And they said, "Oh, we need to do computers. You do it." I was an English major, but it worked out well. And I got an enterprise management system for the publishing company and grew into a love of technology, small business management. And I started doing consulting for the small mail order publishing industry. And so I started that in 1994. And then by the time I had moved up to Rochester in 1995 from New York City. And then by the time I started having kids in 1999, I had been doing a lot of e-commerce consulting. So a lot of web work, such as it was at the time. And I had my first in 1999. And then as my second one was coming in 2001, I was realizing that there was so much family friendly opportunity here in the Rochester area. It was a great place to raise kids, actually. And I thought there should be one website where everybody can go to find out what's happening. There was no such thing as a web calendar in 2001, as amazing as that sounds. And so I thought, oh, I guess I can start one of those. So when Ella was born in 2001, I kind of took my maternity leave from my other consulting business to start this just as a lark. And you had to be a real nerd to run it in 2001, right? At that time, communications people and technology people were just really separated. So, but I always had this vision of it be going beyond Rochester. But it took actually 8 years for that technology to catch up with the vision of expansion. So until then, it was just me in Rochester being the rah-rah Rochester mom. And along the way, homeschooling my kids. They went to Montessori preschool, but then we decided to homeschool starting sort of in elementary school. And it was easy in a way because I was the kids out and about lady. I took my kids everywhere. Everybody expected me to take my kids everywhere for my business. So it was, my kids will tell you it was a unique way to grow up for sure. But everything blended really well. So we were very, very fortunate. And it was just as the technology was changing and my kids were old enough to be independent and on their own, everything kind of blended, right? This was 2009. So I then took on partners, took on investors, re-engineered the site completely on a different content management system so that it didn't take nerds to run it, and then started expanding. And so at that point, I was able, with my kids doing their work, to say, okay, girls, I'm going to a meeting, get your work done, see you later. And so it was extremely freeing, right? It all sort of happened at that same opportune time. And so past then, they like to say, and it's true, they educated themselves. Um, my husband's a mathematician and was a professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology, so that was useful. But we just basically coordinated what they learned, and they kind of did it themselves. So that's our sort of combination entrepreneurship, homeschooling journey,
I love
all
it.
wrapped in there.
And what I love, Deb, is that like so many entrepreneurs, you created Kids Out and About to solve a need in your community for your family, and then watched it grow and evolve beyond that. Sort of scaling to other communities with these resources. I know that the weekly newsletter that you put out that reaches 800,000 people each week, you have a personalized note each week.
Yeah, I've done a column every week for the last 23 years at this point.
Amazing.
So
Amazing.
415 words to say something that is meaningful, right? So it has to be meaningful. It has to be unlike what else is out there. Um, and it has to actually, really say something that speaks to everybody. And remember, I'm writing to a wildly diverse group of
Mm.
people. And so in this oddly polarized time, what I've discovered is that there's this thing about parents, as that if you write to the personal, you assume that my readers, I can safely assume, they care about what their kids are experiencing, and they care about having opportunities open for their kids. And so being able to talk about how, of course, the aim of education is to have all doors open for your children by the time they're ready to launch into adulthood. And of course, every child learns differently. Those things, while it sound really, everybody, that resonates with everybody, but at the same time, the implications are deeply subversive, right? It's, well, how do you then tailor make an education to your child in an environment where, if they're going to a traditional school, they're teaching to a standard that can't by definition be any particular child. So how do you manage with that? What do you do? And so when I talk about how we all want our kids to grow up independent and culturally literate and all, like it, that's some heck of implications, but I don't get any pushback because
Yeah.
parents do want that. And
Nice.
so they're all, and I also like drip in like, homeschooling and alternative education and micro schooling as just incidental to the things that you talk about in the culture.
Yeah.
And I think over the last 23 years, it's normalized in a way that it just wasn't, especially before the 21st century. Like I don't think I carved any new paths really. The people in the generation before us did the real carving of by the time I started homeschooling, you didn't have to be fringe to homeschool. It was just something that just became ever more of a normal option, which
Right.
has continued, and of course accelerated
Yeah.
with COVID and post COVID. So if there's a silver lining there, that's it.
Yeah, and what's so great about kidsoutandabout.com is that it includes sort of directories of schools. I know you're adding in a microschool tag. It has homeschool programs, public and private schools. But it's not just education. It's all
Oh no.
sorts of information and resources, summer camps and weekend activities and after school
Mhm.
programs, everything you can imagine that families are really looking for in real time. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about sort of the business model. I know you said as you scaled, you brought in partners and investors, but my understanding is that at least for some of the events, it's free to post.
Oh, it
So
is all
maybe,
free to post, right?
yeah. So
So
share how this works.
so there's a main mission, which is to celebrate each region and all of the opportunities and resources in that region that help make it the ideal place to raise your family if you are in that region. So it's basically to help make what's invisible visible and easy to access. So we save parents time, we give them loads of ideas and connect them with things that they never would have found otherwise. So essentially the mission is celebration of the good stuff. And if you celebrate the good stuff, then you encourage the good stuff. You both you create an audience for that good stuff. You nurture the audience for that thing. And by making it free to post to the calendar, to be on the lists, then that lets these organizations let their creativity flourish. They don't have to spend so much on outreach as they might. And so there have been tons of programs like small nature programs at nature centers, which they could never have them if there wasn't this free way to spread the word, because they would have to spend too much on marketing. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't pay, because, of course, we keep the lights on by these organizations buying advertising on the site. But if you go to any of these given regions, and you can just Google, places to take kids in Dallas or Houston or Salt Lake City or, Inland Empire, California, or, Boston or wherever. If you Google that, you'll find the site. But the advertising that you're going to find there is what you want to see anyway. You don't have to be like sifting through and trying to get rid of all the ads that are in between you and the content that you want. This is where, pretty much exclusively local experiences that some people come to the site for the ads in addition to all the lists. So yes, we want every organization on. It's very easy. There's a little for organizations button in the upper right-hand corner of every screen. So if you have a micro school that you want to be public, or if you have some kind of education program or some kind of just fun thing that you're doing, if you're a performer, if you do, nature crafts, whatever, if you have a summer camp, post it. The instructions are very, very easy. And then you can buy extra advertising if you want to. So it lets us be very mission-based. My secret mission, of course, is to drag the culture an inch north before I die. Meaning, I want there to stay an orchestra in my town. I want there to be arts. I want there to be science. I want there to be history and culture and sports and all that. But today's 5-year-olds are the patrons who are going to pay for that when I'm 100. And so I want that to stay. So my mission is to help parents connect their kids to all of these things really easily and inspire them to do that. It's not going to be a measurable thing that I can, say when I'm 100 and like, okay, but it's definitely fits in with my mission. This is the thing that I'm doing to try to make the world a better place.
So, Deb, I just love how you've been able to evolve the company over time based on the needs of your customers and sort of your evolving needs as a parent. And so in 2016, you launched BeyondTheNest.com as a complement to Kids Out and About. Tell us about that.
Sure. So by that time, that was 15 years after Kids Out and About had started. And a lot of people just stay getting the newsletter because it just tells you all kinds of things that are happening in your area. Kid focused and then family friendly. But then I started getting emails from parents saying, well, my kids have flown the nest. Wouldn't it be nice if you had something for more folks who weren't as focused on kids? So I thought, that's true. And it proved to be very straightforward. So BeyondTheNest.com, we sort of basically turned the whole country on in May of 2016. And the calendars basically overlap about 60%. So there are things that are for everybody that are on both calendars, things that are fundamentally for kids, just on Kids Out and About, and things that really are more of interest to adults that wouldn't be even of interest to teens, even though 36% of our readers have teens. But that's just exclusively for Beyond the Nest. So it's just really easy to post both at the same time. The form asks you, so you get sort of double the exposure for no extra work.
Just amazing. So you're reaching between these combined platforms, 11 million visitors a year in 52 regions, again, across the US and Canada. And you've done some really interesting sort of market research on who your audience is, including an extensive survey a while back, or not, I guess, not too long ago, about what parents are looking for specifically for their children's education. I wonder if you can share some of those findings.
Sure. I mean, because I have this deep, abiding interest in education in general, freedom also in general, but also in helping parents connect with as many options as possible. I've paid attention to what these trends are over the last 20 years. And I watched COVID accelerate the trend to parents realizing you could do it on your own. Actually, first, I watched the technology evolve. It's a deeply pleasurable thing. It became ever easier and ever cheaper to educate your kids. In fact, I did a calculation before, like right after my kids kind of went to college, I did a calculation. We spent under $10,000 total for 2 children for basically K to 12 education over all of that time. It just became so much less expensive and so much more accessible. And then COVID happened. And the way we adapted at Kids Out and About was within 10 days, we had split into an in-person and virtual calendar. And so we were able to sort of leverage, if you were a small library or educational organization doing things in one region, suddenly you had this international platform. And so we kind of skyrocketed during COVID, and I got to watch what was of interest to parents, what parents were sort of steering their kids to online when we were all so regrettably deeply on our screens. And then after COVID, when we had sort of a change of parents' attitudes toward education. In part, it was they were told, well, you can do it for that whole year plus or minus that they were stuck inside. And so they started to believe that, oh, I can do it. Oh, wow. And in fact, the sense that it was parents' responsibility to get their kids educated, I would say that also accelerated. It's not your responsibility doesn't end with getting your kids, behind on the bus. It's my job, whether I'm outsourcing that education or doing it myself, to make sure that all those doors are open. So then in a post-COVID world, I got really intrigued by what parents were paying for when it came to education. So what actually, and I looked and tried to find if there was some research in 2022 about this. And I couldn't find any research specifically on this. So I was like, oh my goodness, I have my own lab. I have 800,000 subscribers to a weekly newsletter. So what we did was we asked parents, if you pay for education as opposed to sending your kids to private school, as opposed to sending your kids to public school, why are you doing that? And so we had a couple of focus groups to come up with what those options could be. And then we put the words out to, please take this very quick survey. And it asked about 25 different dimensions. How important is it to you? And it also asked, where are your kids going to school? Are they in preschool, elementary school, middle school, or high school? And those types of answers broke out into two different types, two different reasons: day-to-day life at that school and preparing your kids for their life and career. So those two types. So there were 25 questions, 11 in the first category, 14 in the second, or maybe reverse. And to me, the results were so fascinating. So 550 parents across the country answered that in the space of 2 weeks. And no matter where they were located, no matter what the age level of their kids, the number one reason, like they answered moderately important or extremely important, the number one reason that they sent their kids to private school was that the teachers cared. Caring of the teachers was the number one reason. And that was really interesting to me because I sent my kids to Montessori school for preschool, and that was not the number one reason I sent my kids to school. I sent them to school because there were all these great works there that they could learn and they could have fun with kids, and that was my reason. It was not the caring of the teachers. I thought, oh, no, I care, I'm the parent. But no, that was it. Number one, that the teachers, the sense of the teachers having a personal investment in your kids. And only number two was competence or knowledge of the teachers. This is in the day-to-day experience. The high standards of the school was number three. The school's particular stated educational or cultural mission was number four. The accessibility of the administrator was number five. Tailoring it to my kids' individual needs was next. Now, when I say that was number six, that doesn't mean it was low on the list. For tailoring the program to my kids' individual needs, that was 73% of parents found that either moderately or extremely important, the ability to tailor it. So we're still in that appearance. And the school's pandemic response was also a full 2/3 of them found that important. 2/3 of them also found autonomy from political or educational trends important, so that the school goes its own way and didn't just have to buy into whatever the state told it to do. That was important. The quality of the other students, that would, like the bullying stuff, would fall in there. How many rules the students are expected to follow was also 2/3. And that could be either few rules or many rules. Like, that we didn't say which. And so things like the athletic program was the least. But then when you looked at the child's preparation for life categories, what was the most important thing? Also fascinating to me. Helping students develop character was the number one preparation for life that parents voted for. And it did not matter where they were in the country. I even had Texas as its own little category. Develop character, really, teaching them to work with others, fostering out-of-the-box thinking, these things that parents found important for life that, frankly, we homeschooling parents find pretty important for life, too. Preparation to get into a good college wasn't until number 6, and education in the arts and humanities, and then STEM, that wasn't until 7 or 8. So it was really interesting. Also, fostering a spiritual life was important to about a little less than half. And then I thought, well, maybe that plays into the whole character thing. If the number one reason that parents send their kids to prepare them for life was to help them develop character, maybe that's the religious folks. So then what I did was I took out the religious folks. I took out everybody who said that it was a spiritual life was important. And then I looked again at the ranking, and it was still the most important. It was 63% as opposed to 73% of parents found it extremely important, but it was still number one. And even for the non-religious folks. So this to me was so fascinating, partly because it didn't confirm my own biases at all. It was completely different, and it didn't matter how old your kids were or where you lived. It was the same rank. So,
Just
whoa,
amazing.
I
It's such
know.
great information and insights, Deb. I guess a few things that I think about in hearing these results. One is it's no surprise then that micro schools and low-cost private schools and various hybrid homeschool and homeschool collaborative programs are leaping into the
Yeah,
forefront, that more parents are seeking them out and more education entrepreneurs are building them. It's clearly something parents want. They want that more individualized environment. They want
exactly.
those nurturing, caring teachers. And in many cases, of course, it's teachers who are launching these new schools and spaces because
I
they
know.
want to be able to be more nurturing and more
Hmm.
individualized.
It's so
Um,
exciting.
I think what's really fascinating, you said one of the least important characteristics was sports teams. And of course, we
Yes.
often think about sports as being, one of the key reasons why a family might choose a local public school. But
Yeah.
that also speaks to the fact that parents are more open to this idea of unbundling education, that we can have
Good point.
sports in one place, we can have extracurriculars in another place, we can have kind of core academics in a different place, that it doesn't all have to be under one roof. And it seems like
True.
there's more openness to that. So that's really neat. Any other surveys sort of in the works or that you've done before? It just seems like you're getting such fascinating perspectives here.
So I've done the same kind of thing for different industries, like for martial arts, for example. Martial
Yeah.
arts is a really interesting phenomenon because so it was not a thing before the Karate Kid, right? And so when Ralph Macchio and all of us Generation Xers sort of fell in love with Ralph Macchio, that's when the martial arts industry exploded in our country. It became and it's only accelerated, or it's at least only increased since then. And there's an interesting thing about the martial arts, and it's actually an interesting green flag for me as a standard, believe it or not, where we expand to next in Kids Out and About. So think about the
Wow.
martial arts. The martial arts combine, they're sports, but they're also a very cerebral kind of thing. They're also very character based. And it turns out that our success for kidsoutandAbout.com, if there are at least 13 martial arts dojos or studios in a region, that's an actually super good indicator. That's a great place for a Kids Out and About to start. It means that there's enough people in the region to have competition so that they'll pay for advertising, right? If there's only one martial arts studio in a little town, there's not going to be enough reason for them to advertise. So it wouldn't pay for us to have a site there. But at the same time, it's an indicator of the kind of values of that community, like that it combines the sort of sports and sort of more cerebral, brainy character things. So yeah, and so when
Really
we did a
neat.
survey on that, last year, that confirmed that. That's why parents were sending their kids the same type of overlap. Yeah, so it's
So
fun.
great. Well, as a mom of two kids who are in martial arts and have been for many years, I think that that's great, and certainly, can see why kids out and about would have a lot of success in areas where there are, these large, there's a large concentration of martial arts studios. So, and
Yep.
I also find, sort of anecdotally, that there's a lot of overlap between homeschooling, unconventional education, and martial arts too. I think that
They have
that,
told me that. In fact, so I'm
yeah.
I'm excellent friends with some martial arts studio folks in various places, and they have said that it's been fun to watch those homeschool programs proliferate. When but think about it. Typically, those are owned by small entrepreneurs who own a studio or three or seven in a region. So they tend to think outside the box too, and they tend to think who would be great markets for us. And that is, in fact, a fabulous market for a martial arts studio. They do a lot, by the way, of crossover with going into private schools and
Mm.
small educational organizations. So if you haven't thought of that, if you have a micro school, consider bringing in or asking if there are classes possibilities at some local martial arts studios. They'll tend to be very receptive to that idea.
Yes. Oh, such a great tip, Deb. Really appreciate it. So, you're giving already some great advice and tips around entrepreneurship. I'd love to maybe go back to that a little bit and
Mhm.
get some of your advice for other parents, maybe who are thinking about starting a business on the side while they're raising young children, like you did,
Sure.
or someone else who is thinking about launching a small business in their community. What advice do you have?
Yeah. So, well, I got lucky. So I happened to give birth to two academically inclined girls. And I have a mathematician husband. Not that I'm not good at math, but it meant that we got to sort of divide and conquer in terms of how we were interacting with the kids and how our work worked, right? He was a professor. We were not 9 to 5, clock in, clock out kind of people. So we had it easy to be able for our professions for all of us to do our work at the same time. Um, and that's actually really key to me for our success as having done this successfully. We're all working together, whether we're in the house or we're out of the house. I have my work, David had his work, the kids had their work. And it was self-fueled and self-initiated. What we got to show the kids over this whole time is that, well, it's as you get to be an adult, it's your responsibility to put enough value into the world that you get paid for that value and you get to sustain your life, and that it can be extremely fulfilling, right? The other picture that we got to paint for them, by the way, was um, this sort of sense of ourselves as having entrepreneurial personalities. Even though David worked for RIT, you always work for yourself. Doesn't matter if somebody else is paying you a salary or not. You always need to have the mentality of, I am doing this work, and right now I have only one client because I work for one person, but I could pick up and offer my services to somebody else. There's a level of flexibility there that I think is so extremely healthy, especially as the world progresses and life stops being you work for somewhere for 30 years. So that was
Mm.
really useful for them. And also got to see your work as something you decide to do. So in my kid's case, and that it's for you. Um, it was important to us. Like, so my strategy, like my best strategy ever was this little phrase. I'm not going to let a 9-year-old close the door on your 18-year-old self's opportunities. So now really is the time you need to learn fractions. And by meaning the times that I said because I say so to my kids are zero. I decided that before they were born. I was never doing the because I say so. It's because there's a reason for things. We do things for a reason. And the reason is the world demands that if you are going to have all your options open, you need to know this certain range of things. And so my job is to inspire you to want to do that, even if you don't really want to do it right now. And so I would talk about the things like, yeah, here are the things that I don't really want to do right now, but they're for this particular end. Um, Also would paint the picture for them of adulthood is much easier than childhood, which is completely counter the culture, right? People whine at their children. Oh, you have it so easy. I wish I could be 17 again. My child was 17. She's like, I would never want to be 17. Why would you ever want to be 17? I said, don't worry. I don't want to be 17 again, too. It's going to be so much easier when you're 27. Don't worry. But that's a different message. But the thing is, if you do this really, really, really hard work when you're a kid, adulthood is so much easier. So that's why you really, Ella, you really should, you know, read that chapter and summarize it for me, please, in 3 paragraphs, because this is in your interest, in your future interest. And I'm right here. If you have a question, here I am. I'm the best coach you need.
Right.
So that was our attitude for this whole thing. And it's worked, pretty much. So,
Yeah, I love
yeah.
that overlap of entrepreneurship, parenting, and unconventional education. You just see how it all sort of neatly goes together
Good.
in a real kind of aligned way.
Mhm.
So, Deb, as we begin to wrap up, I'd love to circle back to this incredible resource that you have because I know that you're eager to encourage more micro school founders and founders of these small, low-cost private schools and hybrid homeschools and
Yes.
homeschool collaboratives to post for free on your website in the regions that you serve to let more parents know that they're available. And what I think
Yes.
is so neat about your platform is that it's all voluntary. So there's a lot of emphasis now on how do we let parents know what's available to them in terms of their education options and what
Mhm.
schools are in their communities. And there's all kinds of different approaches. But what I really appreciate about your approach is it's entirely voluntary and bottom
Right.
up. So it's
Exactly.
all individual schools, individual founders
Hmm.
posting for free their services for any parents who might be interested. I wonder if you
Yeah.
can share a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So in the upper right-hand corner of any kidsoutandAbout.com page is a little link called For Organizations. And there's how to post your organization on our site. It is completely free to get a user ID and then post your organization. And then once it's approved, which is pretty quickly, post to our calendar. So on average, a little bit over 10,000 parents per week look at what's happening in their local region. Like they're really coming for the calendar.
Mm,
And then they look at all the lists and things like that as well. But like the calendar is what is really engaging. So you should post anything that's open to the public.
yes.
And even so, here's the thing: even if um, nobody comes to that particular thing, what you want is to continually be visible as an option. And by doing that, that's going to change the culture ultimately. So it's going to raise your profile. Like maybe the 7th time that people see you doing something, they'll think, oh, what is that thing? I can go and take an after school class. Oh, wow, look at that wonderful immersive nature experience or whatever. Um, so be visible, even if at that moment it doesn't seem to have like sort of a return on your time. It's good for us, for our industry. I mean, it's good for the industry of people who celebrate great things to do, but also for alternative education as being options. So
Yeah.
that you work with my mission, I work with your mission, and together we can change the world for free.
That you were free. Such a great resource. So founders, school founders can post their school. So it could be searchable for parents in their
Yes.
region.
Hmm.
And they could also post again for free any events that they're hosting. So if
Yep.
they were going to be hosting an open house or some kind of holiday event or like an after school program, as you mentioned, they can also do that in addition to their sort of general business page that's searchable.
Absolutely. Yeah, we
Ah,
have, in fact, as
great.
so you're tagging things as you're posting them. So when you tag your organization, you want to tag yourself as a private school and as a micro school if you're a micro school and what level of educator you are. So then you'll automatically appear on those lists. And then when you post open houses, click that it's an open house, because then you'll be, in addition to being on the general calendar, you'll be on the open house list. And then when you do that, by the way, email me. I'm a real person. I have 21 employees, but I'm still me. Email me and tell me that you've posted the thing. And then I'll go and like gift it some extra boosts on the homepage and all of that, because this is in everybody's interest.
Oh, and what I'm just so excited about this. What a great
Thank you.
resource, again, especially for the emerging school space, and for letting parents know what their options are. They may not even know what's available in their own backyards.
Yeah.
So this is fantastic. So I know the website is kidsoutsandabout.com, and listeners and viewers should go there. If they want to connect with you, Deb, directly, what is the best way for them to do that?
There's contact information there on the four organizations or at the bot. Like, it's very easy to find me
Great.
also. I would absolutely love to hear from people. And any of my staff will too. That it's just we are real people, unlike sort of Google and Facebook and other places that you could post. We actually really care about what you're doing. So please, like, let's grow that list of options. Let parents see just in the wide list of options that they have options. We'll be, converting people to there are options. We can do this. It's not too hard. Yeah, it's
And
important.
one final question, Deb. What is the future like for your entrepreneurial ambitions? I imagine new regions to
Yeah,
enter into, new
sure.
employees to hire. What's next?
So what I'm currently looking to do is to see if I could expand to the next 100 cities. And the thing is, it's costly because the technology costs and the labor to make sure everything is editorially functioning well. If I could figure out the way to lower the cost so I could go to not as big cities, like maybe they only have 3 martial arts studios instead of 13 martial arts studios, that is my dream. And I need to solve that problem. So how do I do it with less expense? That is what I'm working on over the next year. And so, people say, well, what about artificial intelligence? That's not the answer yet, but we're keeping our tabs on everything. So stay tuned.
Exciting times ahead. And again, just so grateful for your resource and for sharing it with us. And Debra Ross of kidsoutsandabout.com and beyondthenest.com. Thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thanks. It was great, Kerry.